Hello and welcome to Strange Journeys. In November of 2013, I answered a Craigslist ad looking for a storyteller of the odd, unusual, paranormal, and the strange, little knowing what it would lead to. So I began to work for a national haunted tour company out of Salem, Oregon, developing a walking tour for downtown Mobile, Alabama. We started taking the tours a few months later. I eventually became the Eastern Regional Manager as well as the National Training Manager. And as you've heard me mention several times before, that was where I met fellow ETs Andrew Bateas and my co-host of sorts, Ghost Guy Tim. Um, and as well as frequent special guest Kent Rasmussen and Al Luna. Well, in January of 2015, that company disbanded, and we were all given permission to strike out on our own if we would like. And thus, Strange Journeys was created. And tonight, you're going to hear some of the stories that started it all. Take a trip into the unknown, into the unseen, the unexplainable, and the unbelievable. Join our strange journeys. Are you ready? Well, welcome again to Strange Journeys. I'm Tom, your ghost host, and that's Dagny Kelly over there. And it was the last show that you were with us on, Strange LaGrange. Because of my situation, everything's kind of in a jumble as far as the schedule is concerned.
So I have two questions for you regarding
what?
that. So Lewis was not part of the haunted tour that you got involved
Company,
in.
correct.
How did you hook up with him?
I found him just on Facebook, Southern Spirit Guide, and
Glad you did.
contacted him. Yes, it's been awesome ever since. Yeah, that was just happenstance. All right, today we're taking a strange journey back to the beginning of this show, which was not our first show. We started a few years before that with an actual haunted history walking tour in downtown Mobile, Alabama called Strange Journeys. Here, let me show you this. This was our original logo. We were a most unusual tour. Now, I didn't like calling it a haunted history tour because we did more than ghosts, but we're going to get into that in just a minute. Let's get some housekeeping out of the way. Remember that we provide these shows first and foremost for you, the watchers, for your entertainment. We are not by any means and do not claim to be scholars or experts in any of the topics that we cover. We're simply enthusiasts and storytellers who have fun with these topics while doing our best to respect individual beliefs. And please remember that this show is live and nothing is rehearsed or edited out later. What you see is what you get. The only exception right now is our revisited shows, and they're usually I edit them down for time, basically. because the service that we use only allows pre-recorded videos up to 1 hour. So a lot of our shows go an hour and a half to 2 hours sometimes. No big deal. So I have to edit them for time. And we did our first night treks last night for the first time in a month or so because of the situation with my mom, which she's doing great, by the way. We got her a lift chair and she's doing wonderful. She's loving it. But I have an idea for the next night treks, and I just got to write it out, and hopefully we'll be back on track with that this next Friday, because Lewis and Tim both have said they got stories for night treks.
Nice.
So we'll be doing that. Speaking of, our last show was Strange LaGrange with Lewis O. Powell IV. And wasn't that awesome? He had some of the coolest stories. That Mahalia Jackson story was just so wild.
Never get tired of listening to him.
No, he's got some great stories, and the details and the knowledge that he knows. Well, I mean, he does this for a living, not necessarily the paranormal side of it.
The knowledge.
Yeah, he's the historian archivist for the Troup County Historical Society.
He is a historical.
Yes, he is. And then our last revisited show, which played last Saturday, was our first in the Strange Authors series, where we talked about Tim Shepard's book. So you've gotten the last 3 weeks, you've gotten a triple dose of Tim Shepard stories. We did his Ravenwynd Tours, and then the revisited show of all his stories from his books. And then last night we went live on his tour for night treks. And he not only told a creepy story about this man found standing frozen stiff in front of a window. Go back and watch it. I'm not going to tell you the punchline, but what was creepy about that. And then they had a little mini ghost hunt for us with the dowsing rods, and he would ask questions and you'd see the dowsing rods move. It was pretty wild. And then it was kind of funny. I was getting ready to sign off and play our closing vid, and he was trying to close his camera off and actually shut the show down. And I'm like, I'm going to say something. It's like, how did you, because it sends me a thing every time. As soon as you end the broadcast, it pops up a little window, says, how did it go? And it's a thumbs up or thumbs down. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm not done yet. But I was like, oh, well, it was cool. I mean, but we had a good time. So go back and watch that night treks from last night. All right. Our next revisited show, I've already got it uploaded and scheduled to play next Saturday afternoon. It's where we talk to John and Andrea Bateas with the Grave Hunter Society. Andrea, of course, being one of our ETs, which we haven't seen in a while. They got real busy this summer. But anyway, it's where we talk to them. We've got parts 1 and parts 2. Part 1 playing at 3 p.m. Central, and part 2 playing at 4 p.m. Central this coming Saturday. So if you want to learn about what they do, it is in-depth and intriguing, where they review videos from ghost hunts. They review audio, looking for EVPs. They do historical research, genealogical research, and she found some stuff for me on an uncle that I never knew. He was killed in battle in New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, in World War II. He had just shown up, just landed after boot camp, went into battle, got mortally wounded, and died at the hospital soon thereafter, 18 years old. And that was my uncle that I never knew. He was dead a good 10 to 15 years before I was born. But that's coming up, Grave Hunter Society on Saturday, so catch that out. And remember that you can support this show through Patreon, PayPal, Venmo, or Cash App, or our website, our merch site, strangestuff.live. I tell you what, let me put that banner up real quick. Strangestuff.live. Nope, that's Strange Journeys. Wrong one. Where's it? There it is. Strange Stuff. Well,
we can have both.
there, I need to do that. There it is. Strangestuff.live. You can get your Strange Journey stuff, your Watcher shirt. There's Dagny's pillow, logo mug, logo shirt, all kind of stuff. Oh yeah, and if you remember the stick man, which I know we don't have permission to use these pictures, but wouldn't that be cool to have as a T-shirt?
Oh, or a puzzle. That'd be a great puzzle.
Yeah, that's the stick man that was picked up during the Halloween show.
That's
Look
awesome.
at that one.
That's awesome.
I mean, the video crew filming the Halloween special for Topeka, Kansas caught that, and Tim was a part of. So I thought that was just amazing. All right, and you are watching on YouTube, so please remember this.
Click that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.
What he said. He was just over here today.
Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe.
Subscribe. Please do. Please do. Okay, on with the show. Let me change this over real quick to that right there. Yeah, so if you want to help support the show and don't feel like a monthly commitment to Patreon is your thing, that's okay. We've got like these virtual tip jars set up. You can go to paypal.me, go Venmo or Cash App. I'm sure you're familiar with those. So we are going to Mobile, Alabama tonight. And what I'm going to take you through is just a basic synopsis of the highlights of my tours, because there were tons of stories. I know Lewis and Tim can both tell you there's no way you can fit into 2 hours of walking all the stories that were uncovered. There's no way. When I first started with that other company, we had 2 hours and I did about 2 miles of walking, and I probably had 100 stories, and some of them would leave out because of time. And so after that company fell apart, what I actually did was cut everything in half. I only went down about halfway and came back. And then I started a second tour on the other end of what had originally been my first route, and came back the other way and made a circuit. Actually, I made a bigger circuit because I was able to get in some more areas that I couldn't on my original tour.
That's an easier walk, though.
Yeah. I mean, a mile as opposed to 2 miles.
Yeah, 1 mile is doable. 2 miles can beat someone up.
Well, here was the thing I ran into with the first tour when I was building it. I knew where I wanted to start. I had figured that out because it was easily accessible. It was a big parking lot. We would be using it at night. I mean, it was the Ben May Mobile Public Library parking lot, which is actually the building. I should have gotten a picture of it, but the building is on Government Street, and there is an entrance way there, but it's always closed off because that faces Government Boulevard. But the actual entrance is on the back corner on Jackson Avenue that comes up the side and crosses Government. Well, anyway, the parking lot is back there behind the building, even though it's in front of the main entrance. But it's off of Government Street, so you could pull in off of Government Street, pull in there, and there were 2 entrances into the parking lot, and we would usually pull over into the back part of it. It was well lit, and a couple of big oak trees, which I'll be talking about one of those when I close out tonight. But I would usually start well, I knew what I was saying was I knew I wanted to start there. Well, down about a mile away on Church Street, because Church Street dead ended right there at the parking lot. So I would walk east down Church Street, and at 9 o'clock at night, there was no traffic at all. We rarely had any traffic. But down on the very other end of it was Fort Condy. So I knew I wanted those as my anchor. So the only way I could do that is to walk down there real fast and walk back real fast and do it in 2 hours and tell a bunch of stories. So that's what I did. When I cut it in half, I used the library as my flagship tour, the Strange Journeys, and then we had Shadows and Secrets that met in the parking lot across from Fort Condy. And so we did Shadows and Secrets up Royal Street, down Dolphin Street, and back over to Government, and back over to Fort Condy. And great tour. But what I've done is I've picked some stories from each of those tours. But I'd start this way. Now, Mobile was founded in 1702 as the capital of the French Louisiana colony. It was founded at 27 Mile Bluff overlooking the Mobile River. Now, 27 Mile Bluff is exactly what it sounds like, 27 miles up the river. So Mobile, when it was founded, was not where it's at now. And in 1711, Bienville, the founder of Mobile, moved the city to where it is now. And even though the city was founded in 1702, the Mobile tribe of the Native Americans had occupied this area long before, hence the name Mobile. We were named after the Mobile tribe of the American Indians, Native Indians. And if you've ever heard of Tuscaloosa, I mean, everybody's heard of Tuscaloosa.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, actually, the city was named after Chief Tuscaloosa of the Mobile tribe. And this critter stood over 7 foot tall. He was a big hoss, and was murdered by French explorers, which that's a sad story, but we won't go into that. Now, tonight, you're not going to hear a lot of spooky stories. Why? Well, because this strange journey was founded on more than just ghosts. When we did our tours, we'd tell people, we talk about, I didn't go into it tonight, but we actually found a possible chupacabra sighting in Mobile. Even had a picture of it. We're not going into that tonight. One, because I lost the picture. but we would tell Bigfoot sightings, UFO sightings, and all kind of strange and weird stuff. We actually went into a couple of serial killers, telling their stories that were out of Mobile. Some of the ones tonight are not necessarily paranormal, but they are strange, weird, or dark. Mobile has had a strange history. We're going to touch on a few of the hauntings, but I wanted you to know that there's more to Strange Journeys than just ghosts. And if you've been watching, then you've seen that. We've done our share of serial killers and UFOs, abductions, Bigfoot. We've done all kind of stuff. We have done the ghost, but that's what Strange Journeys is all about. Why does that keep changing on? Oh, I didn't take that one off. Sorry.
We have also done like geological anomalies too.
We've covered the gamut.
We have gone all over. I love it.
So, but I say that as just a caveat to say I hope you enjoy the story. We usually started with the land pirate James Copeland. Now, he was an outlaw in the Mobile area during the 1830s to 1850s. He made Mobile his base of operations for a time. And it's said that on at least 2 occasions, he set fire to downtown Mobile so that when people left their homes and rushed to the fire to fight the fire, guess what he and his gang would do?
Go rob them?
They would loot the homes. Now, this is actual documented fact. I have his book, The Life and Confessions of the Noted Outlaw, James Copeland.
Oh my God.
And if you read the book, it's him telling his story, and he doesn't hold back. He tells about how he and a partner had joined on this cattle drive. Wasn't a big herd, just a couple of hundred head. and it was the owner and his foreman and Copeland and his partner. And one night while they were on watch, they snuck over to the owner of the herd and his foreman and took their shotguns and unloaded them in their faces and absconded with the herd. This was a ruthless man, and he was evil. But they reportedly amassed millions in gold. There was supposedly 3 whiskey barrels full of gold coins that he buried in, well, first in Mobile, but then over in the Biloxi, Mississippi area, about where, oh, what's that main road that goes? It's on the north side of Biloxi. I can't even think of it now. My sister used to live there. But anyway, it's a main drag there. But in that area, in the northern part of Biloxi, is supposedly where these 3 casks, they call them, of gold was buried. Well, the thing was, they drew a map, and there was only 3 people that had the map: Copeland and his partner, and one other fella. And this other fella was found in Mobile one night drinking and getting a little too drunk, and let it slip about the map, and he was mugged and robbed later. And then the gold, Copeland went back to get his gold, and it was gone. There's also, yeah, there's also a rumor that he gave a good stash of gold to someone out in the area that I live in. They call it the Dawes-Wilmer area, but it's kind of the area that I live in, just maybe a couple miles south of me, where I personally live. And it was a family that would hide them out from time to time when they were on run from the law. And he supposedly gave them a cache of gold, and it has never seen the light of day. So supposedly there are still people looking for Copeland's gold, but you don't know. It reminds me of
that city's not too big. You want to go digging?
No. Well, it's I mean, but the problem is, I mean, just in the cursory research I've done, I can't find any paperwork, stating that, or what area it was in. This is just reading through other people's articles that supposedly there's this gold out there. Now, he was finally captured. Well, he got in a gunfight with another gang and was wounded, and he killed this other gang member. And they were finally able to get him on that murder of another gang member from a rival gang.
That's a win-win for the police.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They don't have to worry about the other dude either. But anyway, he was arrested and hanged in 1857 in Perry County, Mississippi. And shortly before, or while he was in jail there in Perry County, he told the sheriff, a man named J.R.S. Pitts, his life story. And that's why we have a book today, because J.R.S. Pitts published it as a book. Now, there's speculation that Sheriff Pitts fabricated all of this. Who knows? But supposedly this is Copeland's own story. Pitts moved to Mobile soon thereafter, and there's a whole intrigue about Copeland being buried, and then his body ends up missing, and then they find it 50 years later in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. It's one of those strange ones, folks, which is why I shared it on the tours. And this is a copper etching of his hanging. And as a matter of fact, I went, and see how Copeland is there? He's the one in the black jacket with the black beard.
Yeah.
I went as Copeland, or the ghost of Copeland, on our Halloween tour one year. I had the white shirt like that and the black, and my beard was black. and I had a hanging noose around my neck, and my face was pale. So
Nice.
I was the ghost of
I
James
I
Copeland.
remember those images, but I never knew the story
Yeah,
to it.
yeah, that was only people who'd been on the tour would actually know, because that's where I told the story. Now, in 1919, the Mobile firefighters waged their greatest battle ever. On May 21st, at 3:25 in the afternoon, a fire alarm was sounded for a fire that started at a trash pile in the rear of Howard Cunningham's grocery store located at Hamilton and Madison Streets. And if you know anything about downtown, that does not exist anymore. It's the area of our dome, our
Okay.
Coliseum. The Mobile Coliseum. They destroyed that whole neighborhood where this fire broke out. By the time companies 3 and 6 had arrived from their stations, the fire had already extended from beyond the pile of the trash to the grocery store and was out of control. It began to leap from building to building, and it spread so fast that every Mobile fire department was committed, and a desperate appeal was made to surrounding areas of Pascagoula and Biloxi for assistance.
Oh,
Winds
boy.
swept the fire from house to house to block to block. Residents made futile efforts to save their belongings. It was spreading so fast. 1,000 men from the Alabama Dry Docks and Shipbuilding Company actually came over to help because they didn't want the fire spreading to the waterfront. But with the best efforts of the officers and the fire department, they were no avail. As darkness settled and the wind died, the fire eventually burned itself out, having consumed everything it contacted. 40 blocks.
Oh my God.
Everything was destroyed. About 1,200 people were left homeless. 200 homes were destroyed. And there were some injuries, but miraculously, not one person died. Isn't that amazing?
It sounds like that was just as bad as the Chicago fire.
Just about. This
God,
is the aftermath.
that is terrible.
The paper at the time look at that. The paper at the time called it a forest of chimneys. Because that's about all you could see.
That is terrible.
But not one life was lost.
I don't know how that happened.
No.
Especially with people trying to fight the fire, because that happens a lot.
Exactly.
And they had that's pretty So was that started by that guy?
No, this was years later. This was about 70 years later, 60 years later.
The luck.
Yeah. Now, one of the most popular places on our tour was the Malaga Inn. You may have heard us talk about it. Well, it was built in 1862, and it's in the downtown historic district. It was originally built as twin townhouses, and you can see them there. You can see how it was twin, but they, back in the 60s, they added the connector there in the middle, and then added a hotel basically to the back of it with a big courtyard in the middle. Weddings and special events are held there. But it began shortly after the state of Alabama passed the secession ordinance in 1861, completed in 1862. And this was the weird thing. These buddies from, I think it was Denmark. But anyway, they were the Goldsmith and Frolichstein families, but they married a couple of sisters, so they built them matching townhouses. But they eventually sold out of the family's hands, and it passed through different owners. And in 1960, in the 1960s is when the family that owns it today came into possession of it, and they made it what it is today. Now, on that left-hand side, you'll see you can't really see it in this picture, but it's got another little section that juts out from the side. And Lynn and I spent our anniversary there a couple of years ago. We had that side room with our private balcony. Now the employees speak. If you look right there, you see where the green canopy goes back to the entrance?
Yeah.
The employees have told me that there are times there's a massive chandelier hangs in that entryway. And you'll see the front doors, and up above that is an apartment, a room. And that's where the original owner lived when she owned the inn. And she has since passed away. They have a big, giant portrait of her in that entryway. But they say they will see that chandelier begin to shake and move because the stomping and walking above on the floor above is so tremendous that it shakes the entire chandelier. And they say that that's the owner when she's not happy with something that's going on in the inn. And so they will see that chandelier shaking. The housekeeping have told me that things will be moved. They'll be working on a room and stop their vacuum cleaner and go do something else, and they come back and they'll be on another part of the room. Or they'll be cleaning, like they used to do telephones in there, and then they come back and the telephone will be moved to the other side of the bed or something, or their cleaning cart would be moved. They experience that all the time. There has also been a woman in white seen on the interior balconies surrounding the courtyard, and especially in front of room 007, which is that room right above the entryway.
Okay.
So now for a while, for a while they promoted themselves as a haunted hotel, but then there's a man that runs it now, and his mother is basically the owner now. It was her sister that used to live there that was the original owner of it. And his mother didn't like the thought of being connected with the paranormal.
Oh, yeah.
So they begin to stop all that and deny any aspect of this place being haunted. And I mean, there are tunnels under there. They've actually done news reports on the tunnels under this building that they believe are connected somehow to the Underground Railroad. That has not been officially confirmed. They found some artifacts that are at the University of South Alabama that are being researched. But other folks have said they've seen Civil War soldiers in and around the entrance to those tunnels. So there's been a lot of activity.
Can you get down to the
technically, yes, but they don't allow visitors. It has to be special occasions for the owner to take people to the, and they're small. They're not tunnels that you can get down to and walk. You'd have to crawl.
Like talk the owner into a paranormal investigation.
It
sounds like the owner wants nothing to do with paranormal investigation.
Well, I mean, when I was researching the tour and building it, I went in there one day and told them what I was doing, and they was like, "Nope, no, we're not going to have anything to do with the paranormal. I'm sorry, we don't want to be associated with it. We appreciate the fact that you want to include us on the tour, but no, we don't want to have anything to do with the paranormal." So, see this little green patch in front of the hotel across the street?
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's the driveway, and then that's the green patch that is actually on the street. I would, to the right of that is a little plaza, which we would stop in and would tell the story of the Great Fire of 1919, and we would tell the connection of Malaga, Spain being a sister city, and some different things in that area. But anyway, we would actually cross the street to be across the street from Malaga Inn when I would tell the stories of the inn. So the very
on the property.
Yeah, I made sure I was off the property when I was telling the stories.
Yeah.
Because they said no. I'm like, I'm going to respect that. So I would go across the street because these stories are found on YouTube. I mean, you can find them. you can do a search on Google and you can find these paranormal stories about Malaga Inn. There's nothing they can do about it. Well, first night, first tour, I got about 25 people out there, probably more than that. And we're all crowded around this oak tree across the street from Malaga. And I got my back to them, telling the story and looking back every now and then and pointing at something, telling stories about the inn. And I noticed out of the corner of my eye when I kind of turned one time that the door opened and the man, the owner, was walking out. And he walked across their driveway and was walking past that little grassy area straight to us. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah.
And he wasn't halfway across the street. He's like, hey, everybody, how's everybody doing tonight? And started talking. And I am so glad y'all are here. Would y'all like to come inside? We're like, sure.
Cool.
So we all traipsed in up under that canopy and in through the entryway. I mean, like I said, there's 25 to 30 of us. We walk into the courtyard and everybody's milling around. There's a big fountain in there. And so I'm just talking to him, thanking him and everything. And actually talked him into telling a couple of the ghost stories. So he's telling people about the woman in white being seen on the balcony. And, oh, it was crazy.
That's too cool.
It was a lot of fun. We had a good time with that one. But unfortunately, when Lynn and I stayed there, we didn't experience anything. We did get the some of the staff to tell us some of the things they had experienced, and that was unique. But we had a good time with that one, So we had a great relationship with them from then on. If they happened to be there, they would let us come in. If they weren't, I wouldn't even ask. I didn't.
It's a real tough situation here in the Bible Belt. You got to really balance things and be careful. You can upset the person.
Exactly. But they were. I mean, like I said, if he was there, we could go in and stay a few minutes and then leave. If he wasn't there, I wouldn't take advantage of it. I just stayed on the other side of the road, told the stories, and went on. Now the stories I've told you so far were actually in sequence. This was the sequence that I told them in. I think the only one out of order might be my UFO story coming up, but for the most part, this was the sequence that I told my stories in. Now, right down from Malaga was a law office at the time. It has since closed. And we would stop there and tell the story of Patricia Krenwinkel. Have you ever heard of her?
No. What a name.
But you've heard of the Manson family.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Is that one of them?
Yep. And she's from Mobile.
The young girl that was one of the that went to prison?
Yes. And I've got an update on that because when we were doing the tour, I didn't have this latest information that I came up with. But she was in on the murders of Sharon Tate and her husband, Roman Polanski, in August of 1969. She was actually one of the ones wielding the knife that stabbed the pregnant Sharon Tate and murdered her. And then the next night at the LaBiancas, it was called the Tate LaBianca murders. When she was questioned later, she claimed that the only thing going through her mind at the time was, well, now he won't be sending any of his children off to war. I mean, she's just, she's kind of strange.
A whole nother dimension in their brains.
Oh, I know it. A different world.
Yeah.
But she was, before she was let out on bail and she returned to Mobile, Alabama, and she hired an attorney. Her local attorney was named Bubba Marshall. And that law office right down from Malaga Inn, Marshall was one of the partners, which was kind of cool.
Oh, nice.
So there was a nice little connection there. She went to prison in 1971, and she's been continuously incarcerated. Last I heard, she was the oldest living female prisoner in the state of California. Now, she was granted parole. Listen to this. She was actually granted parole in May of this year.
Why?
Well, a good behavior, I don't know, but she was granted parole. But just a
refused.
couple of weeks ago, just 2 weeks ago, on October 14th, 2022, Governor Gavin Newsom reversed the decision, citing the continued threat she would pose to society if released.
That's what I was thinking too. If her brain was that far out there at one time, how can we
Yep.
trust that it wouldn't be out in the wrong place again?
Exactly. I thought it was just ironic that here we are. I mean, this just happened 2 weeks ago.
Can't believe they tried to do that.
She was granted parole, and the government said, "Oh, hell no."
That would have been a big upheaval of all
Oh, I
kinds of
know it.
people.
Oh, I know it. That parole board needs to be replaced. If they're paroling something like Patricia Krenwinkel, I mean,
I have heard that she's actually a super sweet person, though.
She may
But
be.
she's insane.
Exactly.
Just can't trust that.
Oh, I know it. All right. I meant to show you that. That's Patricia and Bubba Marshall.
Cool.
And that's when she was fighting extradition to California, which she lost. She had to go back and serve her time. And there she is. This on the right there is closer. She looks older than that now, but
Gotcha.
she's still the oldest living female prisoner in the state of California.
Yeah, you cannot let someone off of charges like that. Not they did.
That's just ridiculous.
That's
I mean,
not
no, if they had the death penalty there, she would have already been fried.
I think it's meaner to keep them for life.
Yeah, I mean, it's iffy for me. I mean, some things you're like, the chair now, do not pass go, do not pass collect $200, and some of them you're like, it might be more of a torment to let them live. You know.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just an iffy thing for me. Yeah, case by case.
I think it's iffy for everybody. That's why it's such an issue.
Yes. There is a piece of folklore that goes back hundreds of years before the time of the European settlers. In 1170, supposedly a Welsh prince by the name of Madoc, that's him right there, supposedly took a couple of ships and a couple of hundred followers and sailed west. He ended up on the shores of Alabama. I don't know what happened to my plaques. I had pictures of the plaques. Oh, no, that's not it. But there it is. Supposedly in 1170, he landed in what is now the Fort Morgan area. He traveled north through Alabama and supposedly settled somewhere north of Paducah, Kentucky. Now, his descendants have been tied tenuously to the Moon-Eyed people of northern Kentucky and also what have been called the Welsh-speaking Indians. There is a folk tale that sometime around the founding of this country, supposedly a priest was sent into the wild lands of central Alabama. Of course, I don't think it was called Alabama at the time. It was sometime before the founding of the country, but this priest ended up being one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. He was trying to convert these Indians in central Alabama. Well, they took offense at something he did or said, and they were about to execute him, burn him at the stake, or run him through the spear, sacrifice him to their gods, or something. He requested and was granted a final prayer for his last rites. This priest was from Wales and began to pray in his native tongue. And the more he prayed, the more the Indians took notice. And they finally released him and let him live, because what they heard was what they called their high holy language.
How
And he
weird.
was speaking Welsh. Well, the theory is that these were descendants of Prince Madoc or Maddox that came through at one time, may have settled in the area for a while.
Interesting.
So there are supposedly a history of Welsh speaking Indians, and supposedly Maddox and his contingency, where they were all the progenitors of all these Welsh speaking Indians. And then we've touched on it before. We've never really gone into the Moon-Eyed people of Kentucky. These are supposedly underground dwellers. They're called Moon-Eyes because their eyes supposedly get really big and really wide because of living underground. There's more to it than that, but we'll have to save that for another show. I've actually thought about doing a show on the Moon-Eyed people.
I've never heard of that.
But it's one of those strange legends. Now, in 1953, the Daughters of the American Revolution placed this historical plaque in Fort Morgan, only to have it removed in 2008 by the Alabama Parks Service to some controversy. I mean, why did they pull down a historical marker? You know, this doesn't fit in the accepted historical record. So
Yeah.
I guess they nope.
That's fine. Doing it all over the place.
Oh, I know it. That historical plaque is now at the Richards DAR house in Mobile. I believe they have it displayed in a little garden out back, if I remember.
I'm glad someone kept it.
Yes, I mean they what they did. Now this was I've called this Mobile's own conspiracy theory because there was never a reason given as to why they pulled the sign.
Yeah.
But it was kept in the attic of the downtown museum for years, until finally the docents at Richards DAR said, "Hey, that belongs to us. We'd like to have it back." And so at least they were able to get it back. Now, the Richards DAR house, I didn't put up any pictures of that, because I usually told a few stories from Richards DAR, but it was kind of in an awkward place to do on the tours, so I never really included much on it in the tours. But you've heard Lewis talk about it because it's in his book. Where'd it go? Yep. Haunted Alabama. And he speaks about it in there some. They've which I've showed the video on here before of the reporter that was interviewing me there, and I had him holding the dowsing rods, and they started spinning, and his eyes got as big as saucers, and I'm not doing that, you know. And there is a story, and I know the paranormal group that did this, and the man that personally did the ghost experiment at the DAR house, he laid some marbles on a bed. He is a friend of mine, and the house is supposedly haunted by the ghosts of children. So he said, if you will make the marbles move, I'll leave them here. You can keep them. Now, Selena, that's right, I forgot about this just now. Selena, that's one of our ETs, was on that team at that time, and she witnessed this. She was there when it happened, but they saw the marbles move on their own, and so they told them, thank you, you can keep the marbles, and they've been at the house ever since.
Cool.
And I went back to join them sometime later on a ghost hunt there. We were all involved in a paranormal conference. Well, they were hosting it. I was one of the speakers, and they had a big ghost hunt at the Richards DAR house. So I was there and I brought some marbles. I said, let's see if we can do this again.
Cool.
Let's try this again. So I spread them all out on a bed, set up my camera where it was running video, and went around and everything. Came back a few minutes later, and the marbles were all in disarray, all over the bed, just totally messed up. And I'm like, they did it again. They did it again. Let me check the video. And a guy was standing there, was like, what? And I was like, the marbles. I had the camera here and I was videoing the marbles to see if the children would play with them again. Oh, I moved those marbles. And I'm like, oh, you idiot.
I saw that coming. Oh, what?
Yeah.
What about these
Because
marbles?
I was getting all excited because the marbles were moved and we'd caught it on video. And he's like, what? And I'm like,
Good thing you had the video.
Never mind. I don't even think I went back and looked at that video. I was like, nah, screw it.
Totally.
What's the point? You just wasted all that time. But anyway, though, those things happen. All right. In 1983, we had an unusual sighting. Now, this is what's so neat. This lady, Miss Pat, was 28 at the time in 1983. She was driving home from work. She worked in downtown Mobile, but lived southwest in I think the Theodore area. She left and headed home on Highway 90. As she turned off the highway, she heard an explosion. And when she did, her car began to vibrate, making it difficult for her to steer. So she negotiated another turn, got off the road she was on, brought the car to a halt, opened the door, and leaned out to see if she could figure out what was going on with her car. But she couldn't, so she got back in and continued driving, and the vibrating stopped. She turned on another road and saw the woods ahead were lit up. At first, she thought maybe search and rescue helicopter was out there trying to find somebody. But she began to get this eerie feeling and got scared. She stopped the car again. And at this point, she saw this about a half a mile west of her. She sketched it out as best she could. Got a little surprised of these pictures coming up in a second. She thought later that the explosion she had heard was this object coming down, maybe landing hard in a clay and gravel pit. She said this thing was huge. Later estimated to be 7 to 8 stories tall, 70 to 80 feet high, and about 6 telephone poles wide. She said it had been clear and cool, so she had driven with the windows down, and she noted a chopping wind, a high-pitched sound, and a roaring sound, as well as the vibrations, she said, and a whipping of the wind like a tornado. And when this object got close to her, she said all the noise stopped. Completely silent. And all of a sudden, she wasn't afraid anymore. She got out of the car to get a better look. And she strained to take in every detail, feeling like a kid with unbelievable happiness. Her husband said that although his wife told him about her sighting, he didn't realize how important it was to her until she started researching and digging out books at the library, looking up UFOs. Now, she estimated that the time of her sighting was only about 5 minutes. She estimated to be about 50 or so feet. This window that was across the front, about 50 feet wide, and she could see people in it. Now, see, I used to show this picture on tour, and you can't really see it there. I got something else to show you in a second. But she was close enough that she could see the people. She said they were about 5 to 6 feet tall, slender, but with chests that were bigger than ours. There was nothing out of the ordinary about their eyes, but what did draw her attention was the grace of their movements, and that the overall atmosphere that she could see inside just seemed sterile, like a hospital. It took a southerly turn as it went from where she was parked, and she said it was staying in the wooded area but not crossing the highway. It lit up the wooded area and the area beneath it as it moved on. It had white spotlights, blue and red lights on the side that intermingled, pointing up to the clouds and then down to the earth. After it was out of sight, she went on home, got home about a little after 1. Now, this is what I came upon today, digging into this again after all this time. We've got an artist rendering.
I swear, like, I'm not even joking. That is what I saw in Illinois once.
Yes.
I've never
really
seen a rendition of it drawn at all, and it's surprising me. That's interesting. I had a friend with me when we saw it. You should have give me that picture and I'll send it to her and scare her.
Oh, okay. Well, see, I used to show this on tour, and that's freaky enough. But then today, I was like, "Holy cow! We've got an artist rendition, and it's so cool."
Yeah, the details you were telling me about the size and everything, I was like, "Oh wow, sounds exactly like what I saw in Illinois."
And that's huge.
My friend Kate was there and she's like, "I'm Catholic. I don't believe in this, but what is that?"
You told us about that on one of the shows. I remember you telling us about that. All right, the next story is how can I put this? One of the most violent and saddest stories that I've ever come across. And it's utterly sad because it's true. But Mobile, in the area of the, it's the Mardi Gras Park now. It used to be the courthouse. I went and got my driver's license there back in the 80s. But it's across from the Museum of Mobile. It was an empty lot at the time we were taking our tours. But on March the 21st, 1981, a young 19-year-old Michael Donald, a young black man, had stepped out from his home to walk down to the corner store and get a pack of cigarettes and a Coke. And not far from his home, these two white men pulled over to the side of the road when they saw him. Went to ask him for directions. As he leaned in to give them directions, they attacked him and abducted him. They beat him within an inch of his life, slit his throat, and then hung him from a tree. They lynched him. And this has been recorded as the last lynching in the United States.
I've heard this story in detail. It's really bad.
Well, I pray to God it was the last one. These two men, James Knowles and Henry Hayes, were members of the KKK. They had been following a court trial that had been going on in Mississippi, going on in Mobile, that of a black man shooting a white cop. Now, I don't know about the court issues at the time where they were making it a racist issue or not. I'm not sure. But the trial in Mobile ended up in a hung jury, so it was moved to Montgomery. Well, in Montgomery, there was not enough evidence to convict the young black man of the shooting. I mean, this is totally unrelated to Michael Donald. But they couldn't find enough evidence to convict him of shooting this white cop. So he was released. And James and Henry, being the proud KKK members that they were, felt like they had to do something about it. So they went and found the first black man that they could and lynched him. Now, a cross was burnt the day before at the foot of the steps at the Mobile County Courthouse, which is why we told the story there, because of the cross burning happened in our route. Now, James and Henry were not arrested at first, but Michael's mother would not rest. She kept hounding the police. They wouldn't do anything. So she went to the FBI. The FBI began to investigate, and they eventually came across James Knowles and Henry Hayes. They were convicted, sent to prison, and last I heard, they were still awaiting Big Yellow Mama at Holman Prison on death row. She went even further and sued the KKK.
I didn't know you could do that. Cool.
Well, her attorney found cause that they had been behind the whole thing because Henry Hayes's dad was the Grand Wizard of the KKK in Mobile. So when they found out that basically he had either suggested or indirectly given them orders to do this, so they were found culpable, and they won a $7 million lawsuit, civil suit.
That's an interesting case.
Well, it totally bankrupted the United Klans of America and set precedent for other similar lawsuits against hate groups.
That's pretty.
At that time,
Yeah,
it was awesome. At that time, the KKK didn't have $7 million in assets, so it shut the doors. So hopefully, I mean, it's probably not the end of it, but that took the wind out of their sails, as they say.
That's a courage to do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. His mother, Beulah May Donald.
Wow. I
Yeah.
never knew.
She just wouldn't quit until she won. That was awesome.
Didn't she display his body for everyone to see?
I don't remember that.
Is that
but I don't know. But here's Michael. And they put a historical marker up close to his home, and they even named a street after him.
No.
But there was a picture, police file photo of his body hanging from the tree, and I never used it on tour. I never used it on tour. I didn't bring it up here because I just can't handle that. Now, we would round the corner from that empty lot, which is now the Mardi Gras Park, and we would go down a little bit, tell a few ghost stories, and then we would come just past the Admiral Hotel to an empty parking lot. Because in this empty parking lot used to be this building in the mid-1800s. Isn't that something else? It was eventually the home, or the building was eventually used as McGill High School before it merged with and became McGill Tulane. But this was originally the home of former mayor, the last name Chandler. His daughter Florence was born there in 1862. You know what? What else? I just clicked with me something about, the Malaga Inn was built in 1862. So 2 blocks away when she was being born, they were finishing up Malaga Inn. But she was born in that building, Florence Elizabeth Chandler, and she grew up to be a popular socialite, a wealthy little socialite. Her dad was a banker and at one time mayor. Her father passed away, and when Flora was about 18 years old, her mother remarried an officer in the German army at the time, and they moving across the Atlantic to be with her mother's new husband, her stepdad. While on the ship, she met a man 18 years her senior, a man named James Maybrick. And after a whirlwind courtship on, that sounds funny, a courtship on the ship, but they disembarked in England and were married in Liverpool soon thereafter. Almost immediately, rumors of infidelity began to fly between the two, each one accusing the other. And 8 years into the marriage, James Maybrick was found dead, and Flory was accused of his murder, which the inquest believed that his death was caused by arsenic poisoning. And Flory was the one responsible for giving him his medicine every day. So they believe that she administered arsenic to him. Now it came out later that James was an arsenic addict. There were at that time people who took small amounts of arsenic every day for whatever reason. I don't know. But they went to trial, and it was a big sensation in the newspapers at the time. You know, big write-ups and artist renderings of the court proceedings. And Flory was convicted and sentenced to hang. Now, one thing to note is Flory is the first U.S. citizen to ever be sentenced to the gallows in England. It had never happened before, but a little girl from Mobile was the first one. Well, a couple of cabinet ministers began looking into it, and they realized that while Flory might have been responsible for his death, they didn't believe that there was enough arsenic in his system to have killed him anyway, plus the fact that he was basically used to it from taking it daily in small doses. So her sentence was commuted, her death sentence was commuted to life in prison, which I found out in her book, Miss Maybrick, My 14 Lost Years, that a life sentence is in England at that time was no more than 20 years. If the prisoner survived 20 years, they would just be released.
Interesting.
But the point was surviving. Most did not survive, which is why they said, if you made it 20 years in here, you deserve to live.
You're good to go.
Go on about your way. But she lost everything. She had 2 children that she lost. She lost her social standing. She lost her entire wealth. She was able to regain her U.S. citizenship, and so she returned to the United States, spent some time traveling, trying to make a living off promoting her book, which it's deceiving because the actual book is only about that she wrote is only about half of that. The rest of it's technical things about legal points concerning her case and her trial and everything, and some notes on arsenic and all kind of stuff. It's an in-depth book.
Interesting.
I really enjoyed it. But anyway, here's Flory.
I like that they
There's
show
a
you
young
both.
lady.
They add those details so that you can understand what the situation was.
Well, there's her and her husband after they were married. She, like I said, she tried traveling the lecture circuit and promoting her book and preaching on prison reform, but that didn't work out too well for her. She ended up alone and penniless in a little village just in Connecticut. And she died in about 1933, I believe. Well, the only thing that she left was a few cats. She was the local cat lady. And a family Bible. And supposedly in that Bible was a faded scrap of paper with instructions on how to remove arsenic from flypaper.
What?
So
twist. Oh man.
So who knows?
It sounds like karma took care of that one too.
Yeah. Well, Now, this may seem ironic, wildly coincidental, but what most people don't realize is that her husband, James Maybrick, is one of the top men suspected to have been Jack the Ripper.
Interesting too.
So,
So maybe she did a good deed.
yeah, I mean, who knows?
If she even did this deed.
Yeah, if she did, I mean, maybe a little girl from Mobile, Alabama took out the most notorious serial killer that ever lived. Who knows? But like I said, her home there, the only thing that's left is one little about 5-foot section of one of those columns right off the sidewalk at that parking lot. That's
Do you
it.
see how amazing that structure is? I
Yeah.
mean, we have so much more technology now, and our structures are a lot less.
Oh, yeah. They're not near as fun.
I'm doing something wrong.
Okay. Oh, gosh. I got to hurry. This next one's kind of fun. Now, Mobile has made, Dagny, you can tell me here, what has been Mobile's number one claim that they've made over the years?
I don't know. I don't
That
know
they
much
are
about
the,
Mobile.
where the
I've
home
never even
of,
been there.
what's Mardi Gras? Mardi Gras, I just said
Oh, Mardi
it.
Gras. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Mobile claims to be the home of Mardi Gras.
Yes, for sure. I've definitely heard that.
Okay. New Orleans claims to be the home of Mardi Gras.
It's always been this little controversy.
Well, Mobile was founded in 1702. New Orleans sometime later. So that's why Mobile says we started it. We were here first. Now, I don't have any problem whatsoever with our original French soldiers sitting around the fire there at 27 Mile Bluff, drinking and getting toasted and yelling, Laissez le bon temps rouler. No problem at all with that. It probably happened, but there's no way to know. There was no official celebration until 1830. In 1830, this fellow right here, named Michael Kraft. He looks like he's winking, but from what I understand, he's actually missing an eye.
I was gonna say, what's up with that?
Yeah, but he's a singular wit of a fellow, always looking for a good time and a good laugh. Well, Michael Kraft, one night, this was actually just before Christmas, him and some buddies were out on the town. And they were partaking in revelry, as they call it in Mardi Gras terms. And they began to, in their drunkenness, parade down the street, which some of them could hardly walk, evidenced by the fact that Michael and a few others, as they were walking past this general store, they stumbled across the gardening implements that were in the front of the store out front on display, causing a clatter, destroying the display, scattering tools and implements all over the place. So they decided, well, that made a lot of noise. Let's do it some more. So they picked up cowbells and rakes and began to continue their parading down the street, banging their cowbells and rakes. And they began the first official Mardi Gras society called the Cowbellion de Rakin Society. Cowbellion de Rakin Society, because they were playing with the Cowbellions and de Rakins, I guess. And thus began the Mardi Gras secret societies. and they have continued ever since.
That sounds pretty reasonable.
Yeah. Well, it does stand to reason that how it started. But this is documented that in their drunken state, they started the first carnival society. And they continued their own parades. And by 1837, was when they began throwing stuff off the floats. At one point, they actually threw white flour into the crowds. Don't know why, but I've actually seen pictures where they were throwing. I've got a series of books here. Um,
Mardi Gras itself would be a
yeah.
fun show to cover.
Yes.
Talk about weird. I love it so much. Ever since I've moved to the South, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, why didn't I know about Mardi Gras before? This is great.
A lady named Ann Pond actually wrote a book called Cowbellion. So, yeah, but I mean, you can just see it in his face. He was cut up.
The wink actually suits him.
I know it.
Whether he has an eye or not.
Well, I mean, that's the controversy. Some people say he doesn't even have an eye, but other people say, no, he was just winking at us. So,
well, if he was wild as it sounds like he was, he probably did something lost.
That's a possibility too.
Break got him.
Well, that leads us to, Joe Kane is credited with reviving the Mardi Gras celebration in Mobile after the Civil War. In 1868, Mobile was still under the control of the U.S. Army, Union occupation, and Joe Kane had had enough. So he dressed up, as you see, called himself Chief Slackabamarinico. Now, most people can't pronounce that, and it took me a long time to be able to say it, Slackabamarinico, and I still have trouble. So most people just call him Chief Slack. But he he continues to this day. Joe Kane still participates in parades to this day, Chief Slack. Nice. Because what they do is, after a certain point, they pass off the persona to someone else.
Yeah, nice.
And this is who has it today.
That's so cool.
Well, he chose a Chickasaw name because it was an underhanded insult against the U.S. Army, because it's believed by some that the Chickasaws have never been defeated in battle.
Nice.
He was joined at some point by 6 other Confederate veterans, paraded around in a decorated coal wagon, playing drums and horns. And if you've ever heard them play, they can't play. That's not the point. It's just they are out there to make noise. They are called the LC Minstrel Band, now commonly referred to as the Lost Cause Minstrels of Mobile.
Oh my goodness, that sounds so fun.
So we actually have, we're the only place that has the Joe Kane Day, the Sunday before Mardi Gras. We have a Joe Kane Day, and we have what's called the Merry Widows. There's about 12 women that dress up in veils. Nobody knows who they are, but they show up at his grave to mourn Joe Kane. They're supposed to be his widows, which historically he only had one wife. And this is the weird thing. She is buried with him. Their bodies are buried together. Originally at the Kanes are from the Bayou La Batterie area. They were originally buried in the Oddfellow Cemetery, but sometime in the early 70s, they were exhumed and brought to Church Street Graveyard in downtown Mobile. But they're buried together. It's kind of creepy. But supposedly these Merry Widows, they leave from his grave. The parade starts at his graveside, and they lead the parade down the streets of Mobile, crying and wailing and missing Joe Kane.
We need to adopt that in Pensacola. It sounds like a lot of fun.
Mobile is a strange city, I'll tell you that. Case in point, 1971. The police department, the newspaper, began to get phone calls. In a week, they got about 50 phone calls to the paper alone that people were seeing this.
What the heck?
A wolf woman. Witnesses described the creature as pretty and hairy. The top half was a woman and the bottom half was a wolf. An unknown teenager is quoted as saying, "My daddy saw it down in a marsh and it chased him home. Now my mom keeps all the doors and windows locked." One witness had heard that the creature had escaped from a circus sideshow. This was up on, it's called MLK Boulevard now, but it was, oh gosh, I used to know. But anyway, it was just off of Highway 45 in downtown Mobile. Now, we found out in our Strange Alabama show, Kelly Kazak wrote an article for AL.com about the Wolf Woman of Mobile. She's included the Wolf Woman in a book. Will included it in his book. Where'd it go? Alabama Lore. He's included her. See her on the cover?
Oh, yeah.
He's got her in his book. And Kelly went through the archives and found that artist's rendering that was done for the newspaper in 1971, had it framed, and gave it to her husband, Will Elric, that has been on the show several times. And during that show, he actually showed us the framed copy of the original drawing of the Wolf Woman of Mobile. How cool is that?
That's totally awesome. What an interesting thing to have. I love it.
Oh, wow. And what I think is the witnesses, she was pretty, but hairy.
My hair. My mom had to lock the door after that.
Yes. All right. 2 more stories and we're going to close it out. Like I said, there's a ton more. We've mentioned it on here, but the actor that got stabbed on stage, the woman was supposed to use a fake knife and she used a real one because they had lovers that had broken up and she just wanted to get rid of him. So instead of using a fake knife on stage, she used a real one. She jumped out the back window and escaped to New Orleans. And now his ghost is seen, or his ghost was seen. The building does not even exist anymore. So tracking that one down has been hard. Like, where was it even? But anyway, the story that got me interested in the paranormal, and Dagny, you'll have heard me talk about it here before, but I'm going to give a little more detail tonight than I normally have. But the story that got me researching the paranormal in Mobile, Alabama, was the story of Charles Boyington's Oak. And they say that there are times, if you're there at certain times, certain nights, it's right off Bayou Street off of Government Boulevard, you can hear the ghost of Charles Boynton declaring his innocence to whoever will listen. Now, in 1834, Charles Boynton was a printer and lived in a boarding house close to Government Street. His friend and fellow resident Nathaniel Frost lived there as well, and they were walking one night down to Church Street Graveyard. Now, a lot of the strange stuff that happens in Mobile is centered around Church Street Graveyard, which actually, I didn't say this at the beginning, but that parking lot, the back of that parking lot is the wall to Church Street Graveyard, the parking lot where we started our tours.
Cool.
We started basically at Church Street Graveyard for all of our main tours. Well, Charles and Nathaniel decided they wanted to go into the graveyard. Reportedly, there was a lot of berries there free for the picking. Depending on which story you hear, it may not have been berries they were going to pick and eat, but a bottle to empty. So some stories said they were going in there drinking. Others say they were in there eating berries. I don't know. You choose which story you want to believe. All we do know is the next day, Nathaniel's body was discovered in the graveyard, murdered, stabbed 17 times. Now, what would police officers, detectives call that today? Stabbed 17 times. A crime of
Passion.
Well, I got no hints of homosexuality out of Charles's story. So, but I do know that he was arrested because he was the last person to see him alive. He actually was arrested on a river boat going north up the river. They said he was trying to escape. He says otherwise. I have his actual statement that he wrote while sitting in prison awaiting his execution. And he says that the trip was already planned because there was a lot of ineptness, from what I understand, from the trial. Supposedly, there are machinations behind the scenes to actually posthumously declare him innocent and apologize for his hanging. But either way, at that time, he was convicted and sentenced to hang. And in 1835, in March of 1835, he was hanged. I'm sorry, February. The day came for his execution, and they asked if he had any last words. And they had the scaffolding built up there for the hanging. And he said he did, and he began to speak and began to declare his innocence. And one thing he said over and over was that not only was he innocent, but proof of his innocence would be that an oak tree would spring up from his grave. Well, Charles went on for just about every account I've read says that he spoke for at least 2 hours declaring his innocence. And finally, the executioner had enough and got up on the scaffolding with him to put the noose around his neck. They got into a tussle, fell off the scaffolding, and Charles broke his neck and died without being hanged. Now, I don't know where the location of the hanging was at, but I do know that he could not be buried in Church Street graveyard because he was a convicted murderer. So they buried him in what they called the Gravekeeper's Garden, which was just outside the west wall of the cemetery, the graveyard. I'm sorry, I keep getting those mixed up. A cemetery is beside a church, graveyard's not beside a church. This is a graveyard because there's not beside a church. There is the western wall. This area that you see there is the Gravekeeper's Garden. Now, there are other oak trees there, but there are only 3 that fit the criteria. There are other different types of trees, like to the right. There's other trees, but none of them are oak trees. To the left of that oak tree you're looking at there are 2 more oak trees, and this is one. Now, this is the one that tradition says is Charles Boynton's oak, and they have even put up a historical placard.
That's
and
so
you
cool.
can see they say unjustly hanged for a friend's murder, predicted an oak tree would grow from his heart to prove his innocence. And that has been placed near this tree. However, I was talking to one of the librarians at the history and genealogy department of the public library, and I said, I'm having my doubts as to this actually being the tree anymore. And she said, you're not the first person to say that. But the city or somebody, well, the Alabama Folklife Association put up that plaque. I came across this copper etching, out of a book published around 1901 to 1910. It says, the tree being the strange case of Charles R.S. Boynton. Now, they show a grave marker there. Now, this is from 122, almost 23 years ago, maybe a little less than that. So the oak tree at that time would have only been, about 65, 70 years old? Okay, so it wouldn't be that big. This is the one, I wish I had had them side by side. This is the one they say it is. Now, again, this is just me. I could be totally off base here, but to me, in this picture that they drew 65 to 70 years after his execution, I see 3 main trunks. Do you see that?
I can see that.
Okay. And when I look at that, from the primary trunk down there, how many trunks do you see branching off?
2.
Just 2. And see the building behind it?
Yeah.
Now, the fence was at one time where that building is. I've actually got on my hands and knees down there at the base and found the original foundation for the wall. It is still there. It's a good 12 to 15 feet away.
That's right on the wall.
And that's right on the wall. Look at this one. What do you see?
It looks, yeah, I see the, well, I can't tell if there might be a third trunk, but the main,
right there in the middle.
Mainly 2 big ones.
Well,
and
look
that
at
wall
them.
is right there on top of it. Wait, go back again. Flash both of them. Okay. Even the shadow seems right.
Yeah. And here's the beauty of this. I was in doing my research for this story, I came across a love triangle, possible money motive, $5,000 in gold. There's all kind of intrigue into this story. And supposedly, as the story goes, he and Nathaniel both were in love with a woman named Rose. And they say that Charles, sitting in his jail cell, would make little heart carvings and carve in the name Rose to leave for her. And what's interesting is that it seems like there was a love triangle that she loved. Yeah, here we go. We were doing an investigation there one night, and I would show the guest those pictures that I showed you. Of course, they were standing there looking at the trees.
Yeah.
You know, they were able to walk around and do all this kind of stuff. And I would let them decide, you know, looking at this picture, which tree do you think it is? And every group, every person always came back to this tree, you know, but we would investigate, and we did the flashlight experiment time and time again right there at that tree, and got some amazing results. And you
What's
can
your
find
experiment?
Where you take a mini mag light and twist it till it just barely goes off, and then you ask questions, and
okay.
if the light comes on, you know, you can use 1 or 2. I have seen people line up like 10 or 12 of them and have all kind of stuff going on. That's a controversial thing, but we use it to great success in the tours. People loved it. We also use the dowsing rods and pendulums and apps. And as a matter of fact, Lynn was doing an investigation with the dowsing rods one night. And after we had come across this story of Rose, she began asking, and that's one thing that most of the people unsolicited would ask on the tours, do you know who killed Nathaniel? And anytime the flashlight was going, it would pop on. Dowsing rods would cross. And Lynn was working the dowsing rods one night and asked him, was it a male? Was it, you know, a man? And they would swing out, no. Was it a woman? And the rods would cross. And we were like, this is kind of crazy. So we began to do a little more digging, and I found a newspaper article from the 1890s, and I've got it in my files here somewhere, that an unnamed woman on her deathbed confessed to the stabbing of Nathaniel Frost.
Oops.
Yeah. About 50 years later, 55 to 60 years later, a woman on her deathbed confesses. And what's amazing is on our tours, we would encourage people to download the free apps, and we would say, have these apps going throughout the entire tour. We don't care. We'll have 2 official stops where we do some investigation, but you can use them throughout the whole tour. We don't care. And I had this one going. It's called Ghost Radar. And I didn't have it going. That's one of the ones we would recommend because it was free. It's still free from what I understand. And so I'd tell them at the beginning of the tour, download these free apps. It's not going to cost you anything. Let them run while we're doing the tour. So I was there at Boynton Oak, standing in front of this tree, telling the story, and I got Rose's name wrong. I said something like Mary. Told this story 100 times. And I said, I don't know where it came from. I said something like Mary or Joanne or, Amy or something, different. And somebody, I don't even know who it was, somebody's ghost radar spoke up and said, Rose.
That's cool.
I was like, I'm sorry, Charles. I know better. I know her name is Rose. So from beyond the grave, he corrected me. So we just thought it was so cool. We had investigations there every tour, and always had some amazing results. And the funny thing was we had to walk around a couple of buildings just to get to it because there's no access from the graveyard.
There's a wall in the way.
Exactly. And the building for the history and genealogy department is right there. And then there's another building that actually butts up to the wall. Like I said, in this picture, you can see the building, but further up, there's the actual wall, but it's butted up right to the building. They built the building right on the wall. So you can't even walk behind that building to get there. You have to walk all the way around that other building. And so that was like the capstone of our tour. We would end up with Charles's story and then the ghost hunt. And then we would head back to the parking lot, stop by a graveyard. And if it was open, sometimes they would forget to lock it. They usually locked it at 4. If it was open, we would step in and visit Joe Kane's grave, which you'd find bottles of beer and, Mardi Gras beads on his grave and all kind of stuff. It's pretty cool. Then we would head back to the parking lot, and there was this massive oak tree that we would park just beyond. And to head out on tour, we went beside it, but coming back, we would come around the other side of the parking lot, and we would walk under this massive oak tree spread out probably 50 yards on either side. Just a massive old oak tree and moss hanging down, Spanish moss hanging all over it. And I would tell this story as we were closing out the tour. Early in the Spanish colonial period of Mobile, there's a story told of a pirate that lived in the Bayou Battery area, and he was famous for his long, flowing hair and beard. He was proud of it, would manicure it and oil it, and was extremely proud of his hair and beard. Well, he took a fancy to a young maiden down in the Bayou Battery area. Well, he approached the family and said he would like to have her as his own. The family resisted. Of course, he's a pirate. They didn't want their daughter with a pirate. He threatened to kill the entire family, but she was like, wait a minute, I'll go with you under one condition. And he said, what's the one condition? She said, if you chase me and you catch me, you can keep me. He thought, simple enough. So he agreed, and she took off running. He thought it was hilarious. So he took off running after her. Saw her dodging between bushes and trees and thought, this is going to be easy. She's just playing hard to get, I guess. So he chases her through the bushes and the small trees until she arrives at this massive oak tree, and she begins to climb. He laughed and he thought, I've got her now. Not a problem, no sweat. So he begins to crawl up after her. She would stop at a branch and taunt him. Come on, you old dog. Can't you catch me? And so he would climb a few more branches up, and he began to have trouble climbing because the limbs were starting to get caught in his hair and beard. But he ignored it because she was a beautiful young maiden that he wanted to have. So she would climb a few more branches and look back and make fun of him again. You old brute, you can't keep up with me. And she climbs some more, and he climbs some more, and his hair's getting tangled, his beard getting tangled, but he keeps on climbing up after her. And she gets in the very top, highest of the branches, and he tells her, look, you have nowhere else to go. You are mine now. And she said, no, I think you're mistaken.
Oh, no, she didn't.
No, she said, the tree has you now. And she jumped nimbly down past him and branch to branch and made it back to the ground and disappeared. So he's pissed off by this time, and so he starts to struggle to get back down out of the tree. And the more he fights, the tighter the branches get on his hair and beard, and he fights and he fights and he fights, and he's breaking limbs and cursing and swearing and continues to fight and struggle, but the limbs are encroaching on him tighter and tighter and tighter until there's no struggle left in his body, and he's left hanging in the old oak tree. And they say for months and years after, his hair and beard continued to grow throughout the oak tree like moss.
Oh,
like
interesting.
Spanish moss. And that was our tour.
That was good.
All right.
Good.
Yeah, we always had fun ending the tour with that one. And then we'd ask for tips. So, so if you've been watching and you enjoyed the stories, there's tip jars along the bottom
Like and
there.
subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Well, Dagny, any thoughts? Did you learn anything about Mobile, Alabama?
I learned a lot, and I loved it. But I'm confused about where you started. You said that the company that started the tour was from Salem, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
How did you end up in Alabama?
That was just their home base. They were across the country, even in Hawaii and Canada.
Okay.
I think they even had a tour in Alaska at one time. They were a great company. The problem was they tried to go too far too fast.
Yeah.
And it's like things got spread out so far this way that there wasn't enough this way, and it just kind of fell apart.
Yeah, I get it.
And I was actually the last office employee to be with the company. I was working in Mobile, Alabama, but I was part of. I worked directly for the owner of the company.
Yeah.
And so I was. Even the owner of the company left. They even had shipped me a company phone that I hooked up through the internet, and I was the last office employee that had a company phone. And so, excuse me, all these tour guides calling in saying, "Where's my last paycheck?" And I'm like, "I don't know." Excuse me. So,
so you held on to the last second of them.
Yeah, I stuck it out further than anybody. Kent Rasmussen was one of the first to leave. Andrea and Tim left before I did, and Al Luna, I think he'd been gone a little while too, but I was the last one to actually carry the brand,
Yeah.
and not that I was trying to keep things together. I knew it was over, but all my tour guides that I had trained and all the tour guides that worked for the company couldn't get answers from anybody. So I was trying to at least stay, accessible.
Totally.
I'd gone out and tried to find and got another job. And so I was trying to stay connected to the former employees and trying every day to get them answers and as to what's going on. And they kept promising, we're going to get back up. We're going to get going again. And it just never happened. They told me, you can have the tour, which thankfully, I had written it. I had designed it from the ground up. They sent me some suggested stories, and they didn't have a good research department. Andrea and Tim will tell you that. It was like
Andrea is a good researcher, though.
Oh, she's amazing.
For sure.
And
Tim too.
She can tell you that when they would pass out scripts, they were horrible.
Oh no.
And I trained, God, 100, 200 tour guides, 150 tour guides, something like that. And we'd go through a general class. Each week I had about 15 to 20 tour guides. This is how fast we were growing. And I had a general class. It was a 3-step process where everybody that week would be in it was an open conference call. And Andrea still had my training notes because she would help me train them sometimes. And we would go through our training outline and practice different things on the phone as a group, just general stuff. And then I would sit down over the phone with each tour guide and go through their script. And we taught them how to research, how to plan your route and what to look for and places and things like that.
That's a pretty cool job.
It was a blast.
Yeah, I like that.
It was a blast. We even had to teach them how to do ghost hunting because most of them had never done ghost hunting.
Cool.
So, if we had another tour guide close by, we would get them to go after they'd been in my class and one-on-one with me. Then we would send them out to a local, one of our other tour guides, and let them follow along with them for a while. So it was a great job and I loved it. And the main thing, it was the only thing I did away from my house was go lead a tour.
Yeah.
Unless I had to go downtown for some research or something, And so, and we were working on Salem, Oregon time. So I didn't usually start work till 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Oh, that's nice.
When they finally got into the office, I could sleep in and take my time, but then
the other 3-hour difference.
Yeah. And so it was a lot of fun. Of course, I was also the Eastern regional manager. So every tour guide from Maine to Florida was my responsibility. So I had to call and check in on them, see how they were doing and make sure we got their time submitted and all kind of stuff. And it was a fun job. I love my job now, but
I bet that connected a lot of cool people though. I see it did for you. I can imagine that's a really good way to connect a lot of people in similar interest.
Yeah, it was great. Like I said, the lady that hired me was actually in Southern California. Her name was Bridget. She had put the ad on Craigslist, and I don't remember why I'd been out of work at this point, but I was just looking through Craigslist, and I saw this. Oh no, I wasn't out of work. I was looking for something better. I was working a parts counter at an Advanced Auto Parts store, and I'm like, I got to do something better than this. And I saw it, and I knew it was part-time, 1 or 2 nights a week leading this tour. And I got paid $50, $60 for leading a tour, which I thought 2-hour tour, $25 an hour, not bad. If I do that 2 nights a week, it's $100. It wasn't a bad deal.
Yeah.
Of course, when I got promoted in the company, I got bumped up from that. And then Lynn came on board with me, and I called her my secret weapon. I was the ghost host and she was my secret weapon. because she worked the crowd for me. As I'm up telling stories, she's working the crowd and
Gotcha.
making sure there's no stragglers and nobody's going the wrong direction, and making sure everybody's staying together, and repeating whatever I'm saying if they didn't hear me. You know what I mean?
That's a good
Yeah.
combination.
Yeah, and then she would tell some of the stories, and when we would stop, I'd tell a little bit, and I'd say, "Now, Lynn's going to tell you this story," and she would tell them about little Mikey that works that lives in the Carnival Museum downtown. It's and he steals different things. They came in one morning. They used to come in every morning, and there's a certain mannequin display would be all over the floor. They would have it dressed up in Mardi Gras costuming, and they'd come in every morning, and the mannequins would be laying on the floor, and one day the director was like, I think his name was Mikey. "Okay, Mikey, I've had enough. Stop this right now." And the mannequins never fell over again. And that
You said
think,
it's a circus place?
no,
Circus museum?
it's the Mardi Gras Museum. It's the
Mardi Gras.
called Carnival Museum of Mobile.
Cool.
Yeah, it hadn't been. And it's what's weird. They've got the court jesters. And let's see, the Mobile Carnival Museum. They've got. Let's see. I was trying to see if I could find a picture of it here real quick. Yeah. Oh, here's a good one. Let me share the screen. This is the front. Let's see, the front entrance to the Carnival Museum, and they've got, where'd it go? Well, I just had it there. Oh, I guess that picture changes. That's what it does.
Oh, wow.
But they've got all kind of displays. They've got these court jesters on the front porch of the place.
Yeah. That looks like a fun place to check out.
Yeah, but there it is. Now, see those balloons they're holding?
Yeah.
Notice they're on like rods and not sticks.
Yeah,
It's
they're
because,
not straight.
yeah, they're not real balloons. Well, those are just fake because they're made for the display. But in the parade, those are actual pig bladders.
Ew.
Real, yeah. That's what they used for years. We blow them up and paint them. That's
Whoever
the
came up
tradition.
with these.
Yes. All right, Dagny, we are almost at 2 hours. So you can see how much I would talk for 2 hours way back when, and never ran out of anything to say. And that's one thing Lewis and I were talking about. I took a tour. The guy that he didn't take over for me, he started a tour after I stopped doing the tour. He started doing one, and I went on one of his tours to encourage him, do a good job and show him how we used to do things. And, if you need anything, let me know. And he would start the tour at this little restaurant and then say, "We're going to walk down so-and-so." And then they'd walk about a block or two. Then they'd stop and he'd tell a story. And then, "Now we're going to walk over a block or two this way." And they go over there and tell a story. And he did that about 5 or 6 times and the tour was over. And I was like, wow. He only told like 5 or 6 stories. I would tell 50 or 60 because from the time I started till the time I ended, I was telling stories for 2 solid hours.
Yeah.
And we would have our stops where we would stop at a location and tell stories about that location.
But there was so much to tell.
Yeah, well, and walking in between them, I had other stories to tell, and like walking from where the Malaga Inn I mean, just the next corner was the Marshall Law Office, and we tell about Patricia Krenwinkel. And then from there, that street down to the right was the Phoenix Fire Museum, that's had a lot of paranormal activity. And I would tell those stories, even though it was probably a block south of our route. I could just point down there, see that building with a cupola on top, and that's the Phoenix Fire Museum. And we don't really have time to go all the way down there and back, but I'll tell you about it. And then from there, we would tell the UFO sighting, the picture I just showed, and other UFO sightings, the orange ball of light that's been seen in other locations around the country has been seen over the bay in Mobile. All kind of stuff. If you go back to the very first show of this season, the Year of the Humanoids, 1973, there are several things. Mobile is mentioned several times in that report from CUFOS, the Center for UFO Studies, I think is what it's called, that J. Allen Hynek actually started. Not MUFON. This is separate to MUFON. This is CUFOS.
Gotcha.
But they put out a report in 79, I think it was, called the 1973, the Year of the Humanoids, and we went through that on our first show of the season. So some good stuff there. Dagny, thank you
Of course.
for being here.
I love being here
appreciate it
with
every time. I appreciate it. All right. You got a name for that?
Nah.
Okay. All right. Next time, I'm not sure, but we've already been doing some research into the Smithsonian conspiracy that we talked about at the beginning of the season, where in newspapers from 100 to 150 years ago, they would find this incredible thing, giants or Egyptian tomb in the Grand Canyon, all this kind of stuff. And then it'd say, and we've called in experts from the Smithsonian, and you never hear from them again. You never hear of that finding again. So I want to dig into that. We've already done some research, but I want to do that again. We have talked to Andrea because we mentioned that she and I met with this other tour company. Her and a good friend of hers used to do a tour in, I think, Dayton, Ohio. I could be wrong about that, but in Ohio. And I want her to come on and share tales from her tour that she took up there. She didn't think her friend.
Together.
Huh?
Get all of the tours together.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know why I hadn't thought about this before, especially since Lewis came on. So this season I said I actually want to do a part 2 for Tim, because he was on here by himself. I wasn't able to be here. And he didn't even cover an hour and had some interruptions and had to quit early. And with Lewis, he just barely scratched the surface on stories too. So we've got more stories from each of those tours, and from mine, there's a bunch I did not touch on tonight. So anyway, I want to come back with a follow-up to each of those shows. We want to do Andrea's former tour, and she didn't think that her partner, because they were a dynamic duo, it was Andrea and Debbie, and they just kicked ass when it came to their tours. It's one of the most popular tours in the company. We kept getting 5-star ratings every time they'd take a tour. Everybody talking about how they loved Andrea and Debbie. Andrea and Debbie just loved them. And so I want to hear the stories from that tour. All right, Dagny, we're going to call it a night. Thank you
happy
again.
Halloween.
Yes, happy Halloween. You got your gypsy look going again. So
it's
or your pirate look.
Kind of Pirates of the Caribbean a little bit.
Okay, kind of pirate, kind of gypsy. Okay.
Kind of just covering up my purple.
Okay. Well, watchers, thank you so much for being here tonight, and we'll see you hopefully in 2 weeks. But that could change. We could do it in 2 nights. Who knows? I don't know yet. We will see. So on your journeys out there, stay safe and have strange journeys. Bye-bye.